Righty, right. Let's go and do this. Let's go to Canada. Hey guys and fellow whiskey lovers, welcome to Malt Mariners aka Whiskey Roads. Today we are going to Canada. Yeah, since this is a quite young whiskey channel on your side probably, I've been doing whiskey tastings and whiskey videos for quite a while now, but usually I do them in German and in Germany. So that for that reason you probably might not really know me, and this new young channel has been developing sort of in the direction of going from one country to another. And I just want to keep that going because I really enjoy doing that, and I really enjoy world whiskey, and I love talking about different whiskey styles and different whiskey countries. And today we're going to travel to a country that has been on my travel radar for quite a while. Canada is very high on the to-do list and to-go list. And yeah, we want to talk about Macaloney's. Macaloney's is a really interesting distillery, and before we get into the whiskey, I have to go back just about like a year to get you guys on the same page as me, basically. So I have been a whiskey taster for like 10 years now. I do whiskey tastings, like I said, on a professional scale, and I have been contacted by Graeme Macaloney, the founder of the distillery, in terms of if we could do cooperation, if I could become a brand ambassador in Germany, travel around and show people the whiskey. And by that time I was in Scotland. We had a very nice conversation, and he showed me quite a lot of his what he's been doing. By that time I haven't had the opportunity to try the whiskey. So he sent me a sample set. That's what I have here. So this is like full transparency to you guys. This is basically gifted whiskey. So it is a sponsored video by German law, because I did not pay for this whiskey, and I received the whiskey from the distillery. So by the German media law, I have to flag this whiskey as advertising, just to give you the full picture. It was a very nice conversation, and he really got me hooked on the idea. In the end, I could not do that because I had a lot of other things on my plate, and I'm being self-employed now, not so important for you guys, but I just wanted to let you know that we were in contact and that I had the whiskey sent over to Germany from Canada as a present, or to try the whiskeys, to get a picture of the distillery. And what I think is really interesting is that Canada, as a Canadian whiskey in Europe, and I really would like to hear your personal opinion about this wherever you are in the world. In Europe and in Germany, Canadian whiskey has not really the best, image, the best reputation, because most people think, when they think about Canadian whiskey, they think about Crown Royal and Canadian Club, these really smooth whiskeys that are mainly associated to be like blended whiskeys. And the way of making whiskey, when I talk about whiskey, I usually talk about two different whiskey schools, like the American way of making whiskey with straight and non-straight whiskeys, rye and bourbon whiskeys and Tennessee whiskeys, and the Gaelic, the Scottish and the Irish way to make whiskey with single malt, single pot still, and blended Scotch blended Irish whiskey, which is a blend of obviously grain and malt whiskey. So if you want to dive deeper into Canadian whiskey, I very much recommend to buy this book. I think this is really interesting. I have been reading about half of it. I haven't finished it yet, but it's a very interesting book. It's I'm always not sure if I pronounce it right. Davin de Cargomont. It's probably a French-speaking Canadian, as far as I think. I actually have no idea, to be honest, but I think this is a very interesting book. And Canadian whiskey is very different from most other whiskey styles in the world. It's obviously it's closer to American whiskey, but it's not made the same way as American whiskey. For example, they don't do like classic blended whiskeys in the name of the sense of the name, but they have flavoring whiskeys, so very intense whiskeys, and they, for example, do not have rye whiskeys in the sense like American whiskeys. A straight rye in America would be 51% rye at least, and in Canada, probably any whiskey can be called rye whiskey, and they still use a lot of corn, for example. That's one of the reasons I think, or I guess, why many Canadian whiskies are very smooth and very sweet. So the concept of Canadian whiskey is very different to the approach of single malt Scotch whiskey or Scotch whiskey in general, and the American way of making whiskey as well. For example, Canadians use a mix of used casks like the Scotch and like the Scottish, and they use virgin oak or new casks as well. And as far as I understood it from this book, they mix the casks after maturation to create their kind of whiskey. So I think, like you recognize right now, it's a very complicated and confusing task to understand how Canadian whiskey works, at least from a perspective of a European, Scotch and Irish whiskey centric perspective. But yeah, let me know in the comments if I did any mistakes here. What I think is really interesting, for example, to sort of save the image of Canadian whiskey, I think it was really interesting that Canada was the first country to introduce a minimum age of whiskey, and that was, I think, in 1770 already. I'm not really sure. I'll cut this if I can't find it right now, but I thought that was a really, really interesting fact about Canadian whiskey, that they were the first to introduce this this minimum age barrier. They also said in this book, which I think is interesting, that no Canadian whiskey can be made mixed with neutral grain spirit, which is legal in America, in the United States, to do that if it's a blended whiskey, for example. But Canadian whiskey does not do this. So it's always matured whiskey. There you go. The legal requirement for aging was introduced in 1887. And that was the first such law in any nation. Initially, the minimum aging period was 1 year. In 1890, it became 2 years. And in 1974, the requirement that Canadian whiskey be aged for 2 years was increased to 3 years. And also in oak barrels and not larger than 700 liters. So this is the same law we have nowadays with Scotch whiskey. But now we want to come back to Macaloney's and why this is so interesting. Because the whiskey I talk about now, very unprofessionally, is the Canadian way of making whiskey. But there's also a distillery, and actually there's two distilleries, Glenora in Nova Scotia and now Macaloney's in Victoria, that make whiskey sort of like the Scottish way of making whiskey. Like single malt, like one distillery, malted barley, matured in used casks, and I haven't had the opportunity to try the Glenora, the Glenbretton brand, but I want to try now some of this whiskey. I have tried them on my German channel, and now I'll try with you guys. So this is the Canadian Island single malt whiskey. They do a single pot still whisky as well, so malted and unmalted barley. I tried that in my German channel, and that was really, really nice. Very, very good whiskey. And this is the version. It's the single malt version with a lot of sherry influence. This is Spanish Oloroso and Pedro Jimenez casks, which obviously will give you a very nice and dark color. This is a very young whiskey. We do not know the age, but we know it's 46% and it's non-chill filtered and non-colored. It even does tell us that on the label of the wee bottles, and I think that is very nice. This is the Cath-Nah-Aven. Not sure if that's the right way to say it. Yeah, and like I said, the single malt I tried before, I really enjoyed that. That was the An Loy and the Kildara. The Kildara is the pot still whiskey, which is like Irish sort of style whiskey, and the single malt was the An Loy. That was the two that I had before. Well, and I'll give it a nose and tell you what I think. So basically, what like Graeme Macaloney is originally from Scotland, as far as I remember, and he makes, yeah, Scottish style whiskey in Canada now. I think that's very interesting because it's sort of fusing two traditions of whiskey together. And I really like that. I really enjoy whiskey made in different countries that is sort of aiming for the Scottish quality approach, like Japan, India, and Taiwan, for example, are doing that quite well with Kavalan and the Japanese distilleries. Oh, this is really good. And this is so sweet. The last time I tried the other two Macaloneys, they were quite sweet as well. Very fruity, very sweet. A lot of candied fruits in here. Or canned fruits as well. Candied and canned fruits. Yeah, my English, is not my mother tongue, so sorry for that. Yeah, a lot of syrupy notes, like almost like nut, like hazelnut syrup, and almost like a bit of sweet corn, maple syrup, a lot of honey, like very sweet and light honey, and almost like tinned or canned strawberries, like these tinned strawberries. Very, very attractive nose. I'll give it a sip. Cheers. It's actually quite spicy. It's obviously this is probably a quite young whiskey. It's not super sharp. It has some spiciness in there. 4 to 6% is probably the perfect strength for this whiskey. If it would be higher, it would probably be too harsh and too sharp. The finish is quite short, but it's very elegant, very smooth. Surprisingly, not bitter, but like bitter-ish on the tongue, with some flavors of chocolate and dark cacao powder. Do you say that in English? Yeah, I think you can say that. Almost like a sugared espresso. And I have a peated version here as well. What I really like about this distillery is not, obviously, I totally forgot to tell you guys why I got so excited. So this distillery uses pot stills. This is to me personally, the proper way of making single malt whiskey and single pot still whiskey as well. But they also were the last distillery to work with the great Jim Swan. And Jim Swan was one of the big people of whiskey, the persons that the icons of whiskey, who traveled around the world and helped distilleries to fine-tune their spirit. So he did this, for example, like with distilleries like Kilchoman and Kavalan in Taiwan. He worked with Nick Nean, which is a fantastic new distillery in Scotland right now. And there's so many others, like Cotswolds in England. I could name a few more. Amrut in India. So there's so many of these distilleries, and they're all turned out really, really great. And he was the last. Unfortunately, he died in, I think, 2016. And Macaloney's was one of the last distilleries he worked with. And that is obviously a good reason for a whiskey freak like me to be interested in this kind of whiskey. So this one, the Cath-Nah-Aven, hopefully it's right, is to me a very typical sherried whiskey. It's well made. I quite like it. It's not very spectacular. It's not super complex. It's obviously very cask driven. But I want to try this one as well. It's the Saint-Mail Single Cask Series, and it's matured in Portuguese recharred red wine barrique. That is quite interesting as well. And I want to take a wee sip of the peated version as well. So this is a little run through these three different whiskies from Macaloney's. And yeah, like I said, I tried 2 of them already on my German channel, and this is my review of the Canadian of a Canadian single malt, so to speak. Yeah, it is a Canadian single malt. You can call it that. It's a legal term. And yeah, it's really nice color. Yeah, color nowadays, I don't really pay too much attention about color, even if it's a non-colored whiskey, because with a lot of intense casks, you can obviously put a lot of color in a cask very quickly. I think it's always important to your palate has to prove that the whiskey is well matured and it's well balanced, because a dark color does not really tell you if it's a well matured whiskey. It only tells you the cask was full of intense spirit or something else, like a Perro sherry or Oloroso sherry or port wine before. So you can put a lot of color in a cask in a very short time. I don't really smell much with this one. This is 46% as well, also non-chill filtered, non-colored. It's quite warm in Germany today, so maybe my palate is not really perfectly able to taste all these flavors, because this also is not as sweet as I remember the Pot Still and the Single Malt An Loy. It's also very chocolatey, quite nutty. Has a lot of fruit in here. It's a bit lighter than the Oloroso and Sherry version, in my opinion. So in Germany, all these whiskies will cost roughly about 70 euros, which I personally think is actually an okay price. I'm sorry, I did not check how much you will pay for this in the United States and America. But I think for a single malt from another country that's quite far away from us, I think it's actually an okay price to pay if you like that kind of whiskey. If you like sweet single malt, then you might be quite happy with this. Yeah, I fear that my tongue, my palate is not really on top of things today. But I still really want to try the peated version. So I'll pour a dram of the peated version as well. This is the Siol Dugall, something like that. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. I'm pretty sure I will pronounce it wrong. I will put a link in the description to a video of, I think it's Whiskey in the Six. I think they did a great interview with Graeme. It's a really nice guy. Check out the video, check out the interview if you want to know more about the distillery. Whoops, I spilled some whiskey. Well, that's a first. I never spilled whiskey before. I was so excited. Yeah, I gotta clean this up later. But first, we gotta try this. Ooh, that's very different. That is very different. Interesting. It's peaty, but it's not Scotch peaty. Oh man, I should have really looked into this, if this is Canadian peat or Scottish peat, because usually most distilleries in the world do not get peat from other countries outside of Scotland, because Scotland will sell them already peated malt, and that's really good for most distilleries. But this does not really smell like Scottish peat. Oh, that is very good. Oh my god. Damn, that is very good. I have tried quite a lot of peated whiskies outside of Scotland now. I really like the Ballybannon from Waterford, from Ireland. That's really, really good. Made with Irish peat. Also really, really tasty. I've tried the Paul John Bold from India, but that is made with Scottish peat, I think. Scottish peated barley. Amrut as well. But this is very special and it's different. I have not looked up this information, but I would almost bet that this is not Scottish peat. And if it is, I would really be interested in where it's coming from. If I find information about this, I will put it in the information in the video afterwards. But this is very sweet. It's almost like burnt bacon. bonfire. It's not your classic Isla peat. You would not confuse this with an Artbag or a Lafroig or something like that. But it's unmissable peaty. Unmissable? Can I say that? Undisputable? It's quite obviously peated. This is by far my favorite of the three. And that's also matured in Kentucky Bourbon Virgin American Oak and Portuguese red wine STR casks. Also 46%. It's peated with 27 ppm. Oh boy, I can't wait to get on the internet and find out if this is Scottish peat or not. Because it tastes very differently. But it's very yummy. It's very, very good. This is very good. Okay. I might want to have a bottle of this. This is very tasty. So my conclusion of Macaloney's is definitely a very positive one. I like it. I like the distillery. I like the experimental way of their approach, that they try to make every type of whiskey. Like they made single malt, they made single pot still, they make a peated whiskey, they make a sherry forward whiskey. They make basically every type of whiskey you can make with a pot still so far. And I really enjoyed the Kildara. I think that was the pot still one. Triple distilled, the 3 times like triple distillation, very common in Ireland. So that is sort of your Irish type whiskey. And I really enjoyed that one. That was very sweet, very light, very tasty. But I really like this one. This is really good. Oh my god. Just try and get the camera to give you a picture of this. This is tasty as hell. Right, okay. I have nothing more to say about this because my brain is really shutting off. It's going into the whiskey zone. And it's I'm really impressed. This is really good. This is really good stuff. Especially for the Isla whiskey fan that I am. Damn it. Good job, Graeme. That is fantastic. That is fantastic stuff. I really enjoy this. I like them all. It's all good stuff. If you want to try some unusual Canadian whiskey, and if you want to sort of rebrand the idea of Canadian whiskey in your head, and if you were skeptical like me before about Canadian whiskey, you should definitely give Macaloney's a try. It's a fantastic distillery. I think they're doing great stuff, and I'm pretty sure they will be quite famous in a very short period of time if they're not already in the country that you are. In Germany, they are quite new to the market. Yeah, they are quite new to the market, but I personally think this is quite tasty. And yeah, I have no affiliation with the distillery now whatsoever, so I can basically say whatever I want. Obviously, I would do that in any case, because this is not a sponsored content. It's just a free dram, basically. So thanks a lot to the distillery for sending over these samples to me. I'm quite happy that I could try all of these 5 whiskeys from Canada that are very unusual, and I'm really looking forward for the future and to try some Macaloney's in the near future again. Thanks for watching, and see you down the road.